Okay, so the last couple weeks, I started today's Sunday. I started, uh, let's see, last maybe Sunday. Not really sure. But for 3 days, I worked the ML CAD program, adding to the Starship design, which could also be used to fly ferry flights to the moon, cargo ferry. Uh, Once a suitable landing strip is constructed on the moon. But basically, I had the top level design uh, goal for this spacecraft came a couple months ago when I was looking at the Damselfly, which is the ship I designed about 10 years ago while I was studying aerospace engineering at Cal Poly. Now, most top level would be that it's a Lego, uh, all entirely built out of Lego. Um, the Damselfly, the one of the interesting things is it was developed and finished. Is that I realized that the total length of the damselfly ratio to the total width wingspan came out very close to the golden ratio 1.62, 1.63. So that was kind of a neat thing, and in going to the Spirit of California, what I've named the new spacecraft here, um, basically that's the top level design constraint is that the spaceship maintain directly something very close to the golden ratio uh, in total length to total width, and so and then the next lower level would be that the nose section of the ship be redesigned, as I received somewhat critical feedback uh, regarding the damselfly nose 10 years ago. So what I did was I put it basically. I was thinking, what would the damselfly look like with a wider windscreen, what windshield, and so I went ahead and designed one in MLCAD, um, and then put it to the damselfly nose section, and I built an outline for the Spirit of California nose, which closely resembled the damselfly nose in aesthetic, with the new windshield, and so the the sort of size coupling of the new windshield and the new nose versus the old windshield and the old nose on the damselfly, those are in direct proportion. So the new windshield was 8 Lego units wider, and so the new nose section I think became about 12 to 20 units longer, um, and so that was the main design constraint there that sort of gave birth to what I have now here about 2 months later. It's about 30 to 40% complete as far as a working model. As the design continued further, um, I put out once I had the sort of windshield and nose outline in Lego CAD. I measured out with just some 1x2 bricks what the golden ratio dimensions would be. Um, you know, consider using cross multiplication of ratios uh, to sort of in proportion to with the new nose and windshield. So once I had that uh, those dimensions in the CAD, um, I quickly laid down some wings and tail, horizontal stabilizer. Um, you know, and I think that's about it. Just so I could see, what I was dealing with. Um, as far as what the overall top view was going to look like, just to get a kind of a shape idea. And I like it. The Lego has some cool angles of wings and stuff. Pieces to use for wings and stuff like that. At this point, the my sort of design, uh, uh, I guess you could say, ideas bifurcated. Um, I sort of, thought, okay, I think what I'll do here is throw the damselfly uh, tail pod, with the light engine, the exotic propulsion engine, if you want to call it that. I thought, since this ship is bigger, maybe I'll throw two of them in there, into the view file, and see what it looks like with two of the old engines on there. And at that point, I said, well, I got a lot of criticism of that engine too, um, in that its idea, its design reflected some kind of technology that probably wouldn't be around for hundreds of years, if ever. So at that point, I kind of checked that idea and thought, well, no, what if I designed some engines that maybe would be around in years or 50 years. And that was a big step. I think it happened over the course of a day. And the next morning, and I woke up the next morning designing a different engine, one that was more realistic, one that was, less futuristic. Uh, what I came up with was that instead of working on the main criticism of the nose, I think the first thing I did was throw some engine pods in there, which of course haven't changed yet. Here being 2 months later, but which consisted of some rather large nozzles, and a reactor section and some heat shield sections. And Back then, I had using the CAD MLCAD duplicate function, instantiated 4 of these engines, but I found that whenever I tried to move them around in any direction, the program would tend to leave a piece or 2 or 5 to 10 pieces in the old location. So I quickly realized that I would have to make the engine design into its own file, and thereby creating a part that I could add to the main, assembly page in the CAD. But I did not accomplish that until a month or two later. Actually, I mean, um, basically, as far as I got, I started designing this ship after I had designed a landing gear for the damselfly, and in thinking of how I would want to redesign the damselfly, um, I actually built a laboratory section, a detachable laboratory section in the same fuselage shape. And then I said, well, gosh, what if I made this ship bigger? And wouldn't that be more fun? And so, the next day, or I guess I did that part with the windshield. And with the intention of having detachable laboratory sections, a la 1980s classic Lego space sets, and sort of in progressing here with the design, I've realized I don't really have room for a detachable lab space says this design follows closely to an aircraft design, even though I am a spacecraft design uh, uh, expert after Cal Poly, if you want to call me that. This design doesn't really have you know any basically it's not big enough. After I have landing gear um, and you know habitation module, engines, everything. There may be room for a couple of detachable labs actually. Now that I think about it, but not so much as the Damselfly was a very sort of abstract design, not closely following sort of what America space technology has taught me as far as the space shuttle or any of the moon rockets or any rocket in general. And then that I didn't take aircraft design. I think I'm still following pretty closely to something of the standard industry practices for designing a ship that takes off from a runway, lands on a runway, that kind of thing. So so after I after I had the wings and tail sort of on there, um, and I can't remember if I started designing the nose. I think that was pretty early on, um, and so what I did was the sort of ventral or bottom surface of the nose. And then I had the exact same shape as the damselfly nose, and I replaced the sort of canard wing section with some different pieces. Got a different shape that I liked. Had the same windshields in there for a while, although I've been through two more iterations of windshield design, and I think I like the one I have now better. Best of all, and interesting note is that the current windshields on the spacecraft are four panes thick, 4 panes thick. So that's kind of neat, and that follows what I heard about the space shuttle having a windshield glass that was over 12 inches in thickness. So that's kind of neat, although it's something that would probably not be noticed. It is a very realistic, I think, design point. So that's cool. Like I said. So anyway, in designing the nose, and then finding out that the wing pieces that I use for the bottom nose section, and having known this for 10 to 15 years, cannot be sort of you can't design a curved whole section with them in the minus y or vertical direction. They can be used on top on the bottom of each other. So hook these wing pieces together if the one's below the other, and the curve is progressing in the backwards direction, the aft direction, or if on the nose section the curve is progressing towards the center line. Um, but trying to build in the vertical direction up, these pieces won't hook onto each other because of the way they are built. But I found some pieces that were similar. They're one shorter, but they have little cutouts on their underside, so they do stack on top of each other. And so the next thing I did was sort of design the top or dorsal surface of the nose cone, um, and I don't know if I realized then, but one of the cool things about this nose design is it leaves plenty of headspace to actually for a Voyager on this space plane, starship, to walk into the nose cone, which I thought would. Uh, First off, would be a storage area, but now I'm kind of thinking, you could sleep probably 8 to 10 people in bunk beds, or 2 to 4 people in queen size beds. So, and have room for a little galley, a little commode, that kind of thing. table chairs, TV set, all that kind of a living module. Although it's hard to tell just looking at the design in CAD. LD view has been helpful recently, but just kind of neat. Just kind of neat because actually, the way that the flight deck is now is sort of like some of the bigger cargo planes I think that are around today in 2015, such as the well, now I can't remember. Not so much the C4 Galaxy or the C-141 or the B-2 bomber, but interestingly, to enter the aircraft commander or pilot seat on the left or right, uh, would be actually climbing a short ladder, maybe 3 or 4 steps to up to 6 steps. Sort of if you're walking down the center line of the ship, you would turn to your left or right, um, and climb up a ladder and hop into the pilot or the commander's chair. There's a central walkway, and so that little section would sort of be open, I think, in my mind, although I haven't built it yet. But then, continuing past the pilot commander's flight stations, there is now an arched doorway into the nose cone habitation section, which I think is just so cool because I don't know if I saw that in a movie or I was actually on board a cargo plane, a C-17, I think, at an air show at Travis, or maybe an air show at Lemoore, not Lemoore, but Ames, NASA Ames, Moffett Field. To access the flight deck, a ladder, maybe 6, 7 step ladder was climbed, and next to that ladder was a full-size hatchway doorway into the sort of nose cone of the ship. So, uh, just thinking that was amazing, as most of or all of the aircraft I have piloted were not that large. Number one, and number two, the pilot and co-pilot sat just in the very front of the aircraft. All that was in front of them, on a single engine plane, of course, is the engine and the prop. And in any of the twins that I flew, just a small cargo section, enough for a duffel bag or a suitcase. Uh, just kind of neat that the flight deck area, habitation module area of the starship in question here has a full-size doorway forward of the pilot co-pilot stations along the center line of the ship, which opens into a rather large, although uh, mostly low ceiling, um, sort of space. Probably, first estimate 200 to 300 square feet. Although the floor and the ceiling are rather rather nowhere are they sort of level. Um, but definitely along the center line of the spacecraft. Uh, 7 to 8 to 10 feet of vertical space, and off center line progressing maybe 12 to 15 feet left or right, with the floor coming up and the ceiling coming down, and then past the doorway, um, practically 35 to 45 feet to the tip of the nose, with the floor coming up and the ceiling coming down as well. Um, so that's kind of cool. That's just really cool to me. Okay, so sort of after getting the nose cone like that, I think I took a rather large break. I don't know. It seems like it was about 2 months, but I think that's unrealistic. It was probably more like 2 or 3 weeks. Although time goes slow around here sometimes. um, it was a fairly lengthy break that I took from doing anything with the design. Uh, and when I did come back to it, um, the first thing I thought was that I, I had better start doing something with the main landing gear, and I hesitated to put the gear that I had designed for the damselfly onto this ship, but then I thought, what the heck? Let's look at it. And if it works, then I won't have to design a whole new landing gear, uh, which I don't like. I like sort of the um, overall full assembly, um, rather than the nitpicky kind of subsystem assembly. Um, in the sense that looking at or viewing a 3D model of a landing gear truck does not do much for me, uh, as far as aesthetically pleasing me, um, or as far as the aesthetics creating a feeling of pleasure in me. But looking at a design, whether it's a side view or isometric view, top view of an aircraft or spacecraft, does please me in a sense, and it has ever since I was a young child looking at all the world's aircraft, Jane's aircraft identification book. And interesting side note is that I did spend a lot of time looking through. I wouldn't say all, because that book's over 500 pages long. Um, but looking at a lot of different aircraft, and you know as being that young, it wasn't pursuant to the context of, oh, this is what I like this one, this is what I'm gonna use as a template, when I design planes 30 years later, 25 years later. But I guess I do have a pretty strong sense of what I like and what I don't like in an aircraft, which is, as an aerospace engineer, designer, I think is a good thing. Um, but perhaps a rare thing. Perhaps a rare thing. And certainly a lot of aircraft or spacecraft, aesthetics is not important at all. Being replaced by a mission, um, efficiency uh, factors. Although I haven't really looked into it, uh, you know, before, I would say that a lot of times, uh, or probably 90% of the time, the overall finished design of an aircraft or spacecraft more reflects the mission, as far as you know um, range, or landing, takeoff and landing qualifications, takeoff distance, landing distance, that kind of thing. So, being happy with the sort of aesthetics of the nose, or as happy as I could be with the limitation of only, a few kinds of pieces that I could use to build it, um, I did move on to putting the Damselfly main landing gear against the sort of budding design here, and interestingly, that main landing gear sort of became a very, very important uh, sort of design constraint in itself. Being that I wanted the gear to actually extend and retract, um, you know, sort of housing the gear, and how the gear folded and unfolded became a huge, huge, I don't want to say obstacle, but a challenge, definitely. You know, and seeing, at first on the Damselfly, it's like, okay, these gear are five Lego units thick, and when they fold up, they stick down 2.5 units below the wing, and they stick up into the wing 2.5 units, or really 2 units. One unit being taken up of the thickness of the wing. The Damselfly being 1 unit Lego unit thick. So that was like, well, God, I'm gonna have to build some like pods around these parts that stick down, and I'm gonna have to redesign the whole fuselage section, wing section here to house the parts that swing up, that stick up. So when I was looking at that in the Damselfly, I was like, well, I guess that's the next thing I'm gonna launch into. But then it sort of became uh, a new ship here. So now I'm sort of not restrained by having an old fuselage section and an old part of the ship that was, the ventral surface of the sort of uh, section there where the gear was folding up into. Now all I had was an outline of the wing, and so you know, after folding the gear up and seeing what it looked like, uh, folded up in the Spirit of California design, it became, oh wow, so this is really what governs sort of how I design the whole section, the whole HULL section here. You know, as far as okay, I see that when I put the gear in here, that's what sort of defines how I'm gonna make this thing look, as opposed to making it look a certain way and then putting the gear in and saying, oh, I have to change how it looks because the gear doesn't fit with how I already have it looking like. And so, you know, then what happened was I put another knuckle uh, axle on the gear and have it being a dual fold. So in other words, as the gear strut is folding up, uh, the truck and wheels are full from their position. So when this new gear, it's not 2 units thick. It's 1 2/3 units thick. With the truck folded up another 90 degrees. So I had this killer design where I'm going, oh wow, that makes it cool because it's like the whole box here that I'm looking at making around the gear to keep the cabin of the ship, uh, isolated from the vacuum of space and high altitude uh, air pressures, is less than 2 Lego units thick. So that's a great thing. And because my wing on this thing is probably going to be thicker than that. As I was thinking, I'm going to have variable geometry wings for hypersonic flight. Um, I was thinking my wings would be 2, maybe 3 units thick at their base. I forget what the aerospace term for that is. The wing root, be 2 or 3 units thick, and tapering, out. So that was a cool thing, as well. So you know, as far as aesthetics go, looking at the bank gear and saying, "Oh, I need a nose gear on there." Where's that gonna fit? Where's that gonna fit? In the profile view, how far up? How far along the z-axis here? Am I gonna have it right under the pilot station? Am I gonna have it, uh, forward of the pilot station, after the pilot station, how far after the pilot station, and so just looking at the profile and trying to see where I can put a nose gear, and then thinking, okay, where's that nose gear going to fold up? How's that nose gear going to fold up? I'm gonna have to have a box there too. What's that gonna do as far as the central passageway? And what it did end up doing is, now in the design I envision that the central passageway, sort of in the habitation module, once the gearbox is reached, would sort of bifurcate or split into two, a left and a right passageway for the remainder of the sort of fuselage body, without actually having any sort of idea of what that space would encompass, as far as, either mobile laboratories or ground vehicles, that kind of thing. Or just providing a walkway or a crawl space if I have to get back to maybe some cutoff valves for the four engines, some manual cutoff valves. Uh, if that's the kind of thing, I mean, that might be a safety feature of a starship like this. I haven't decided if I'm really gonna have something like that, but I think I sort of am pushing towards that. After the other 500 things that I want to do. Um, so anyway, yeah, looking at the nose gear and then looking at how the nose gear folded up, and then sort of putting the project aside again for a week or two, but then coming back into it sort of about a week ago and working for 3 days, 12 hours in a row, about noon to midnight, making backups, storing everything in the cloud redundantly. Um, there's copies on the phone, copies on the hard disk of the laptop, in the cloud and Dropbox, as well as Microsoft Drive or Microsoft One, whatever it's called. And then coming back into it, and sort of about 1 or 2 days through, I think after 1 day of solid designing, which I believe may have involved tidying up the nose sections, um, with bricks or plates that connected the wings. Um, maybe maybe looking at a different type of windscreen that was on there, because I had two of those Galaxy Commander type windscreens, which, if I put the pilot in the center of the two, had you know um, structural members that just made it kind of stupid. As those were designed for a pilot in the center of each one, putting two of them together, kind of makes it like I either have to take a hobby saw and saw these pieces down, and it's just like, I don't really want to do that, and I don't want to have the pilot, off to the left or off to the right. I want them right in the center. So getting into a new windscreen that first day, and then having made a lot of the substructures, which were just all parts in the full assembly, uh, page model, taking that apart, having the file saved as I think whatever it was called, XSINN5 Canard, um, and then basically multiplying that out into 5 or 6 or 7 um, new new models. I called one engine. I called one, you know, um, main wing left. Main wing port. I called one main wing starboard. I called one nose left. Port nose starboard. I called one tail. Empennage, port and empennage starboard. And then I had one called full assembly. Dot x SINN5 canard dot LDR. And then I had one full assembly gear up, dot blah blah blah, and full assembly gear down. So maybe 8 or 9 or 10 new files. Where over the course of that first day, I went in to, say for example the one called engine, and as it was a duplicate copy, just erased every part of that, sort of outline of the structure and the nose and the gear and everything, until I just had one engine, and then sort of placing the pieces, exactly how they needed to be, correcting any mistakes, in the minutia of the spacing between the bricks, and saving that file as engine, and then coming back into the main assembly, which was actually for a while, for a couple of days there, empennage starboard, um, and throwing 4 instances of the engine dot xsinn5 canard dot ldr, 4 instances of those in there, as parts on their own. So then when I moved them, uh, they didn't leave pieces behind, and so that was a great. That might have taken 2 or 3 hours, just to finally get those engines all set you know, in a cool, sort of, you know, aesthetically pleasing, sort of, sports car Learjet style, you know, configuration, and going, God, this is great, and so I did the same thing with the nose pieces, and that took probably the rest of the day there, and then finally coming into the gear, which were already, you know, sort of parts of in their own, but coming just doing iteration after iteration of gear versus gearbox versus, this gear extended, gear retracted, moving the strut one lower, one higher, changing the top the top panel, which the main gear hinge connected to leave room for the gear once it folded up. Probably doing that 3 or 4 different times, and just starting to come up with a conceptual design for how the gear was going to fit in the main structure when it's retracted, and being happy with that, and then going to sleep that first night after making backups, and sort of, I think I got Pavre working, and not to mention this whole time I had been working on Linux, and so I did have actually a large diversion into getting Pavre to work with Linux, and that kind of thing, and ran into a permissions issue. So I actually had to sudo super user the Pavre, which works from the command line terminal in Linux. It has sudo every time I wanted to render something. So, but then I think the second or third day, Linux, the keyboard failed, the on-screen keyboard as well as the hardware keyboard on the laptop, and I ended up having to come up, just being right in the middle of the design, uh, having to come up with it in Windows, and keeping on going with the design, maybe halfway through the second day or halfway through the third day. So going to sleep that first night, being generally pleased, having had a look, I think, at what the spacecraft looked like in POV, and just going, oh, for shit. Even though now I have a third iteration of the windshield that I like much better, I thought the end of that night that it was looking pretty mean, pretty cool, So waking up and then kind of starting in with the various, little cleanup items, I guess. Maybe going into sort of, I don't know, it got pretty detailed, but as far as moving pieces around, moving structures around with the translation buttons and the rotation buttons, and that kind of thing, details, until at one point, I think in sort of mid morning of that second day, I I kind of went. I kind of come up with a neat new design point, crucial design point, and I just can't make it sound as spiritually pleasing, or spiritual in general, as when it occurred. But it was like I was thinking, like, okay, so if this is actually a exploration starship, sort of on its way to a new planet, and not a settled planet, a civilized planet, but like an early Earth planet with maybe plants and animals, air, gravity, that everything, just like a nascent Earth, but without sort of more advanced, humanoid, uh, 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 settlers or inhabitants. You know, how am I gonna? Why does this thing have landing gear with wheels on it? I mean, I'm not going to go to a virgin planet like that and land on a runway or a beach. Really, I mean, with wheels. Uh, uh, so it's like, well, okay, well then this isn't the first ship to go. The first ships will go and build a runway, and it's like, no, no, this is the first ship to go. I mean, in my mind, so it's like, the first explorer. And it's like, well, yeah, no, I'm not going to find a runway on a planet that doesn't have humans, who have built runways, or and I'm not going to be the first ship if I need someone to go out there first and build a runway so I can land there. And so I thought, well, I don't know how I thought it, but for some reason I started thinking of landing on the ocean off the coast of a virgin planet's continents. And I said, well, I could put the whole thing on floats, and I kind of laughed and said, well, yeah, but then I said, well, no, actually, that's a much better. And then I was kind of like, well, oh yeah, and then what am I gonna do? Like drive a boat and then to the shore, and then I'm like, oh well, yeah. Oh, but better than that is like not drive a motorboat, which is gonna put gas and oil into the Virgin Ocean, sir. How about a paddle boat? How about a rowing a boat? How about a canoe? American Indian style canoe. And so then I'm thinking like, God, I've actually my cargo on this starship is gonna be a pair of canoes, and so I'm looking through, the Lego piece inventory, and there's several boats, like that police boat I used to have when I was a kid, and I'm like, I should put that on there, and then I'm like, no, no, I don't want a big diesel boat, although I could probably fit one on this spacecraft. I want a rowboat, or better than that, a canoe. And it turns out there's some pretty large canoes. I mean, large enough for 3 to 4 people, or easily one or I think basically it takes 2 people, so you can have an oar on either side. Um, and then plenty of supplies to go paddle to the beach and hike, into the forest, find a clearing, or find a camp spot, and camp out for a few days, and then paddle back to the ship and go home. And this is just such a spiritual sort of like, well, this is what we do. I mean, my dad and I have done it at Lake Ajawami, 1998, 99, 2000, where we paddled our canoe. We parked our car, unloaded our canoe, put all our stuff in there, and I think we made 2 trips over across the lake to the campground, set up camp. You know, um, this is more along the lines of, not only is it more feasible in the sense that, um, you know, you, the spacecraft doesn't require a runway on the arrival at the Virgin planet. Um, but this is more along the lines of how people, how our ancestors and early man may have explored Earth. You know, and certainly the coastal areas of Earth are the nicest ones. Well, pretty certainly, at least in my mind. Although I don't know firsthand, except for my travels sort of to Arizona. Anyway, basically, this became sort of an obsession, a passion. Was okay. Well, if I have my ship on floats, that means I'm gonna have to take off from the ocean on Earth, and that means the spacecraft is gonna have to be built in dry dock or on the water. Um, and it's like, you know, um, and when I come back to Earth, I'm gonna have to land in the water too. Um, what if I left the option open? What if I have wheels and floats? Um, but how are you gonna do that with? I mean, somehow the floats are gonna have to be attached mid-flight to perform the water landing on the new planet, and then and the subsequent takeoff, and then they're gonna have to be detached, on the flight back to Earth, to land at the installation at the base at the airport. You know, um, and And so I'm thinking about this is like, well, this is ridiculous. I mean, we're talking about the technology, the leading edge of technology in 25 to 50 years, flying at enormous distance. Enormous distances. Sorry, I got a phone call there that I have to return here in a minute. Um, Flying enormous distances through space, and we're talking about one of the main mission requirements is to crawl back into the sort of back of the ship and attach floats to the landing gear. Um, you know, now are you going to wear a spacesuit or is this going to be pressurized? So this became kind of the hinge piece of an entirely new system of thought about the ship. Is that this thing has a requirement of just got another phone call of having these floats on here. So this was really neat too. And I tell you what, I have been successful with the design, but I'm gonna return this phone call. Bye bye. Okay, so basically, starting off with this recording again about 3 hours later, um, part of the thrust of the second day of design kind of became incorporating floats into the main landing gear, and then the third day kind of became the main thing kind of became putting the float on the nose gear. And the biggest thing with putting them on the mains was not so much designing a float, which, without doing any engineering calculations, looked like it would be, sufficient buoyancy to float this thing, which I sort of envisioned being made out of, carbon fiber composite material that's pretty lightweight and strong. Anyway, uh, and one the sort of hardest thing about it was not so much as I said, designing the floats and positioning them uh, over uh, the wheels and trucks, uh, but which required but the attachment of the floats to the landing gear trucks required a pretty big redesign um, of the truck itself. And then uh, 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 concurrently, kind of the cybernetic organization of the parts tree, um, and then the multiple kind of iterations or cycles or circles of going back to the top level part and adjusting something, and then going to the mid level or second tier and seeing how that adjustment played into the bigger assembly, and then going to the final tier, uh, and seeing if the adjustment to the first tier item, uh, you know, was successful. You know, with the sort of interim goal in mind, um, and then sort of the interplay between having the mains extended and having them retracted, and seeing how these floats, which are gonna be around 20 feet by 10 feet, so 200 square feet, the size of a school bus, sort of not the same shape, attached to a strut, attached to a wing of a spacecraft the size of a 747 jumbo jet or bigger than that, and then seeing how these are going to retract up into the wings, and and seeing how these floats are going to be attached or detached by the crewman mid-flight. It sort of became less of a design and build project more than a think about project. But actually seeing the 3D picture of these giant floats retracted in the belly of this thing, uh, and going, okay, well, first thing is gonna, I remember waking up. Okay, I have these floats now. What am I gonna do? And as I was getting for the day, eating breakfast and showering and all that, going, okay, well, I could have them, the a guy could climb in there and loosen the bolts, and then the thing could be winched up, above him, uh, and then winch down and reattach or something like that. And then I thought, well, but that that's the roof of the cabin is not high enough at that point, so then it could be attached and slid off into a storage area, outboard. And then it's like, no, the wings are not big enough to have a storage area outboard of where the wheels come up. And then I thought, well, then they could be slid forward. And it's like, no, because that's the root of the wings. And it's like, okay, they're gonna have to be slid backwards then. And at that point, I said, okay, well, I can go ahead and turn on the program and actually look at how that's gonna work. And the first thing I did was, make a part that had those things retracted. And looking at it, and I said, oh, well, they can just sit right there, and then the bolts can come out, and then the wheel can extend, the landing gear can extend, and they can stay right there. And then it's like, okay, but then how is, I mean, I want this to be as realistic as possible. How is a crewman gonna climb in there, and it's like, oh, it doesn't matter, it's just a toy, and it's like, no, I want to actually be able to move a Lego guy through the passageway. The whole thing's gonna split apart, and it's gonna be like a cross section, playset. And I want the crewman to uh, I want there to actually be a hatchway, or a tunnel, or a crawl space above the this giant bus-sized float, where I could actually take my Lego guy and put him in there and go, see, he's unbolting he's bolting on the floats now to prepare for the water landing on the new planet. And so when I put those in, it's like, oh man, this is lame, because these things stick up like six Lego units above the top of the rest of the ship. Um, but that's what I have to put in there in order to fit a guy in there. So it's like, well, in real life, it'd be, with real materials, it'd be somewhat of a much grander design. But with Legos, you know, uh, for, what I've got now is just a two Lego units high. Which would, I don't know if it's gonna work, but it looks like it would work. So, I mean, eh, um, and once I had those, I think that I went to some of the other parts of the design. I extended the wings. I remember moving the wings around, back and forth, and giving the whole thing sort of a different look. Moving the engines, starting to look at, the starting to look at, sort of the 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 fact that I had forgotten about the nose gear so much, and that those were gonna have a float. Those were gonna need to have a float on them too, and sort of going, oh man, that's a lot of work to make a whole nother float, and then make the a retracted gear piece, because I had only extended gear piece. And plus I was using the nose gear from the other ship, so it was like, I'm gonna have to redesign the whole nose gear and build a float and have it extended and retracted one, just to get a look
how the float's gonna be in the sort of retracted position. That's too much work for tonight. And so I sort of left that for the third day. And did some other stuff. Maybe that might have been when I switched to sort of the third redesign for the windshield, and messed around with putting the four panes of glass in there, which I already talked about. Being that the space shuttle windows are over 12 inches thick, so my design kind of mimics that. Um, and those are probably going to be the only windows on the whole spacecraft, which is different from the Damselfly, and that probably 50% of the Damselfly was windows, which is silly. But Lego does have these really cool like jail style windows, I want to call them, which are just really like 3 inch thick. Uh, you know no, I mean they're like just enough to like for a person's eyes really, and but they're a whole piece thick. So I might throw a couple of those windows on there. Um, but here's my 9 minute mark. So let me chop this up here. All right. So waking up on day three, just knowing that I had to get the nose gear float in the retracted position before I could really proceed much further with the design of the rest of the ship. Because, in the same way that the main landing gear was sort of and the floats in the retracted position was sort of a governing or governing limitation of sort of the shape of the rest of the thing. The nose gear and having the float in the retracted position was sort of the same thing. I mean, it sort of dictates or controls what the rest of the thing was going to look like. So I was really eager waking up that day to get ready and to start working, because it was like, oh, this is going to you know branch out into like the whole rest of the design here, and how it's gonna be, and I was so excited. um so what once I got the nose gear redesigned, and what I did was add a wheel and just make it real similar to the main gear, except with the longer strut and a smaller truck. um I just took one of the main landing gear floats, and put it into the assembly, um, to get an eye on it, and then reversed it out, saved the file for the, that was the second tier assembly. Reversed it out, saved the file, um, and ungrouped the pieces, and basically made it two Lego units thinner and the same length. And then kind of to get the. I remember to get the nose gear to the point where it could do the truck, and the wheels could do the rotation, to tuck up real nice into the landing gear bay inside the structure of the ship. Um, was a bit of a design challenge using the Lego pieces, because the main gears to enable that rotation had what's called a Technic cross brick, I believe. But the landing gear is rotated differently, in the sense that the main gears fold up uh, uh, parallel to the x-axis of the ship, the wing axis, or sideways. Whereas the nose gear folds up parallel to the z-axis, or actually on the z-axis, so parallel to a line from the nose to the tail. Uh, so using the crossbreak, Technic crossbreak on the nose gear wasn't possible. So I had to do a kind of a makeshift thing. I mean, I didn't want to spend too much time on it, but it probably was an hour uh, at most. And so once I had that working, then went on to the float redesign, and then to the third tier, which is the nose gear with the float extended and the nose gear with the float retracted. And at this point, I was getting pretty good at parting things out, saving files, the sort of cybernetic organization, and the different tiers of the design of the final assembly. And one thing that was kind of funny is that I realized that the first tier nose gear piece was not created with the same coordinate axes as the final assembly. So when I went in there and rotated it to the right spot, and then looked at the second tier, which had been rotated to the correct angle, I had to unrotate that and put the thing on. And then looking at that on the third tier, it came out at a third different angle, and so that had to be unrotated back out and repositioned. Of course, it never rotates around the right point. But that's kind of an interesting thing, is that now I know that when I start creating new parts, I want to be centered right on the 00, and I want to basically make sure that my top view is showing the top, my front view is showing the front, and my left and right views are showing the actual left and right, which is sometimes hard to tell, and still throws me, even now. So I'm getting a phone call, and I'm going to stop this recording right here. Be right back. Okay, so having things, real the real important interplay here between landing gear extended and landing gear retracted, and just always saving a file, making changes on the full assembly file, say the full assembly landing gear extended file, such as the position of the gear, or any other thing that I went through designing, like adding the wings, or like changing the windshields, or all occurred on the or moving the engines around more, all occurred on sort of the third tier level, the final assembly landing gear extended file, and then always having to go in and save the landing gear extended file as the landing gear retracted file, and then go in and add the landing gear retracted parts, and deleting the landing gear extended parts, until I finally decided later on, or actually today, which is a week after this sort of 3-day design period occurred, that the best way to do it was to leave both the extended main gear and nose gear, and both the retracted nose gear and main gear, and then hiding either one depending on which one I wanted to look at. But I still haven't named the file anything other than full assembly landing gear extended. But instead of actually double double saving the files every time and re-adding the parts, if I change, like say I start building the vertical stabilizer, um, just leaving both the parts in there, and then hiding or unhiding respectively, depending on which configuration I want to view. Getting the nose gear in there, and then looking at it on that third day, and basically throughout the day, kind of changing the vertical position of it, and going, okay, if I have it here, then it extends to the perfect spot that I want it to be, which is when the ship is driving on water. There's a slight nose down. I mean, basically one plate unit, which I'm not sure might not be good. Because you think about a boat driving in the water, you want maybe the front to be higher than the back. So I might change that, but it looks right, because most aircraft, the nose gear, when rolling on the main gear and the nose gear, have a slight nose down orientation, I think, if not perfectly level one. Um, but then realizing that uh, the the original vertical position that I had the nose gear in was too low, because when the gear was retracted, there was about one Lego unit, maybe one and a half or one and a third, that I was gonna have to build like a pod again, or something, so that to cover up the strut and uh, when it was retracted, and so having to move that up about 3 plate units, and then retracting it and going, okay, uh, so now it's in a good place to fit, aerodynamically and aesthetically with the ship while in the closed position. In other words, from the profile view, it looks good to me. um, but then going, okay, well, luckily I moved it up one Lego unit, so all I have to do now is move the strut down one Lego unit, and it'll still be, extending to the same point to give that slight nose down orientation when driving on the water. And then going, well, luckily there was an extra unit on the strut, so I can uh, perform that, because the struts only come in length 9 and length 11. So if I wanted it the same as the mains, on the hinge piece, having one unit above the hinge, I would have needed a 10, but they don't make a 10. So it was either move the 9 down one and have it be a slightly different design than the mains were, in that they had the one unit above the hinges, or put an 11 in there, but that would be too long. So what I did was move the 9 down one unit and have a slightly different hinge and strut interface. Um, so that was fine, and I think lucky, because if the strut had been on the hinge without that extra unit there, then I would have sort of been stuck, because the that would have been a whole 9, and then the 10. No, I guess the 11 would have worked, but anyway, it's still cool. I don't know, but that was an interesting thing, in that it ended up that I had moved the whole sub-assembly one unit up to the place where I liked it, and then realized subsequent to that, oh, I moved it exactly a unit, so I all I have to do is move the strut down exactly a unit. If it had been one third of a unit or two thirds of a unit, then I wouldn't have been able. I would have had to do some other more detailed design to get it to be in the right spot, to give that nose down orientation while taxiing on the water. So, and then uh, so being thrilled with that sort of uh, good thing, boon, design, uh, change point, um, I said, okay, well, I'm gonna have to have the guy climbing in above this float, to attach the float mid-flight, and so I'm gonna put the same kind of tunnel, thing above this. This thing sticks out so much higher than the top of the windshields, and like, what am I even doing with the top of the windshields? That it doesn't even look. Uh, it doesn't even look. Like uh, anything like an aircraft or a spacecraft or anything. So, once I got that tunnel on there, and realizing that at some point the central sort of uh, what do you call it, walkway, uh, corridor in the living compartment in the habitation module is gonna split into two, to go around this giant nose gear and float, and then so putting 16 unit bricks to make a tunnel above the float that can be accessed from either the right or left corridor, and going, okay, that's cool, but it still sticks up like so far above the sort of curve of the top side, dorsal side of. Yeah, it looks like that, but I really don't have the top side dorsal side of the spacecraft defined. So going into the main assembly file and creating sort of a makeshift, sort of conceptualized, you know, roof level of, for the entire, aft 70% of the ship, from basically where the habitation module ends to the very, tip of the very aft part of the ship, behind the engines, and realizing that that's maybe uh, 8 times 12, so close to 100, maybe 120 Lego units long. I mean, basically, I've never said it, but the thing is over a meter long, or maybe a little shorter than a meter. So 3 feet or a yard, three about 3 feet long, and so this thing, I mean, creating a curve that I really really liked uh, to look at from the profile view, and going, okay, but um, that silly tunnel still sticks up, um, way high above that, and then going, well, that's okay, because so did the tunnels for the main gear. And at some point, judging by all the spacecraft designs I've seen in my life, it's like, well, I could make that look like something other than a tunnel, you know, um, that someone has to climb through. I mean, I could put a radar dish on it or a cannon or something. And pretty much all spacecrafts are not as aerodynamic as say the Concorde supersonic jet or something. So it's like, I guess I justified it somehow. Um, so I don't know what I'm gonna do with it, but it's gonna be interesting. So then, being pretty happy with that, and at some point putting that sort of profile curve of the aft 70% of the ship, um, drove me to the design of the crest. Sort of, and the whole thing kind of looks like a bird. But that it didn't start out like that. That came at about this point when I was like, okay, well, here's where I want a really strong piece, in between the two eyes, so to speak. And sort of designing the curve for that, and being really happy with what I came up with, uh, and sort of going, wow, I didn't know I was that good, but I really made this thing look like something that I'm really happy with, and I had never thought that the design would sort of go in that direction. Sort of then is when I started admiring the silly thing, more than like doing anything more to the design. And this must have been about midway through, around 6 p.m. on the third day. So I'm going, wow, that is just really cool. And so making a few subtle changes to the curves in this kind of thing. And really, at that point, um, going, huh, I'm so thrilled with how that looks in profile, and sort of reflecting on the fact that I was never thrilled with how the damselfly looked in profile, and wanting to, wishing that I could have made it look better. Well, I hit the mark with this thing, and but there's still all this stuff that I wanna do with it, and at some point, in within those reflection periods, I was going, okay, well, I'll do a nose gear, landing gear door, um, and then finding the ratcheting, gear doors, which enable a set angle for the gear doors to be opened up to, um, and then, sort of like, then I was like, well, I don't know, I was gonna go to designing the main landing gear doors, but I never got to it. I mean, it was getting late. I did uh, throw the engines around into several new different configurations, and realizing I was going to go to creating engine mounts for these things, and sort of the places where they were at. I was like, there's no way I can do engine mounts for these things that are realistic, and thinking of a few ways I could do them, and going, that's just not good enough. That's not going to be strong enough. That's not going to be that's not going to look cool enough. And so then spending a while just moving the engines to and looking at top view and looking at side view, profile view, moving them to sort of a I guess sort of standard, like a Jetstar, like a Lockheed Jetstar, or even a Gulfstream or a Learjet. I forget what they call it, but the engine nacelles are up there, and then there's a T-tail configuration. Just what I want to call a standard business jet. Uh, Sort of, they're not under the wing; they're up by the tail. And there's four engines, so they're both they're the if you take two of the engines on either side, and then instead of being offset in the z-axis, they're lined up. So making a mount is going to be easier, and I almost started doing it, but then I quit because it was late, and you know. I just there's a few other things on the design which my mind was saying, like, okay, go to. I mean, I originally started, it was going so good with nose gear that I was just gonna keep on, you know, designing like uh further and further aft, and but the way that the wings are gonna start coming out from where the nose gear box is, and then the way that the habitation module width is gonna have to be tapered in. It just became like I couldn't just like start designing it. It's like I had to think about it more and more and more, and so it's like it came to the point where I couldn't just you know get an idea and start building it. It came to the point where I'm just like, okay, I have to stop here and you know just go to something else. So then it was like, okay, well, I can do engine mounts, and then when I got there, it's like, no, now's not a time to do engine mounts, and it's like, okay, I could do geared doors, and then it's like, no, that's really not that important. And it's like, okay, well, I could do you know uh the hinge pieces, that'll make it so the whole habitation module opens up like a clamshell, and it becomes a playset, with that I can move the guys around in and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, well, that's something that I could start designing. It's like, wait a minute, no, it's not. I mean, do you really want to have it the way that you've been thinking about, which is with a push rod, on the ass of the ship, you know and then it's like, no, because I don't want to run a push rod, 28, 30 inches, to actuate a hinge or a gear. So okay, then it's like, okay, do I want to have a push rod on either side up here by the habitation module on the nose of the ship, or the neck of the ship, I guess is a better way of putting it. And it's like, no, the sort of push rod idea is like not that great. And it's like, okay, do I want to have a like a knob that I can turn to open these things? And it's like, yeah, but then I'm gonna have a giant knob on my spacecraft, on my starship, and that's not realistic. And it's like, okay, well, why don't I just do the ratcheting hinges? And it's like, yeah, but then the at the point where I want to have the things open and close on the hinge is only one plate thick. So it's like there's the hinge that's one plate thick is not indexed. It'd be free swinging, and there's no way that a hinge that's a plate thick could hold up the weight of the whole front 30% of the ship. So it's like, okay, well, I move them inboard and have two or maybe three hinges, that are indexed, so the thing will open up, like 15 degrees, 30 degrees, 45 degrees, 60 degrees, 75 degrees, 90 degrees, and it's like, yeah, that'll work. But then what about the part of the habitation module that's outboard of the hinge? When it opens up past, like, say, a few degrees, then the structure of the ship that is aft of that um, position is going to interfere with the part of the ship that is opening outboard of the hinge. So it's like, okay, so what do I do with that? Do I have a piece that detaches out that I pull off and then allows that whole clamshell half to open up? And it's like, yeah, but then what is that? Is that like just a cargo area, or just like, you know, so then it's like, okay, well, I could have something that opens up, to behind a little bit smaller to allow the bigger part to open up, and then it's like, well, then I would have to have a little part even smaller than that to open up, to allow the medium part to open up, to allow the big part to open up, and it's like, okay, well, that's what I'll do. And then it's like, Matt, come on, that, like, you've been doing this for 3 days, and it's like, yeah, dude, I gotta just stop doing this. I mean, it's like, the longer I stop doing it, the more chance I have to think of better ideas for with to how to do it too. And it's like, but no, I wanna finish it. It's like, and that's only one thing. So I'm like, okay, well, obviously I'm not gonna start building that if, like, that's not like the best way, or like, even like if that's just like the third or fourth way that I thought about doing it. So it's like, well, I don't even know. I mean, this thing might take forever, and like, that's just one little part, and I wanted to have the wings be variable geometry. I mean, for hypersonic flight, I want to have the wings fold back, or not fold back, but rotate back, so that this thing can fly past Mach 2. And it's like, well, how am I going to do that when I've got the landing gear floats sitting there at the same level, that at the same in the same spot where I want the wings to rotate into? And it's like, well, I can't even begin to start thinking about that. But what I can do is take a look at this thing for 5 or 10 minutes a day every day, and hopefully at some point, somewhere, somehow, I'll think of, like, oh, this is what I could do. And if it's a good enough idea, if the idea is of a quality sufficient, to motivate me to start putting pieces together, and to start seeing if it'll work. And then it's like, I want the whole aft section to clamshell too, and I want there to be a ramp so the canoes can slide down into the water. And then it's like, I want slotted landing flaps, and I want elevators and ailerons, and I want slats. And so I spent time thinking about how I was going to do slats on a wing that's at a diagonal, and then what else? What else? I don't know. There's the vertical tail, the vertical stabilizer, which I actually started thinking about. And I actually got a pretty good visual, and so that's something I can do here. Um, you know, either tomorrow or whatever. But as far as the whole clamshell idea, the whole variable geometry wing idea, um, that's gonna take, like, if I am successful in implementing those two things, that'll be really cool. And then it becomes like cabin design. Either putting bunk beds, or a galley, or a commode, a table, chairs. Then it becomes designing the pilot and co-pilot stations. Maybe an engineer station or a navigator station. It becomes maybe making external hatches, or maybe even making a ramp, like, on the front, so the front house would clamshell open, and the ramp would come down, and then people and things could be loaded on Earth before departure. Um, and what else? I'm trying to rack my brain here before I get up to 9 minutes on this thing, but I'm at 12 minutes, so um, maybe that's a good time to cut it. Okay, so sort of realizing in my mind
What?
that I'm recording a report.
Oh, Matt.
Yeah.
I'll be here in the morning when I take Marlon to school.
Okay.
And then, we need to get Mincy to school, and you're gonna come with me to Slaney's when I'm ready.
No problem.
So ride with me out there.
Okay, this is sort of realizing in my mind that there were all these design points. I mean, sort of the central one being, how am I going to blend the habitation module into the neck, and then into the wings, and then into the tail. So realizing that sort of my initial idea of just sort of taking the whole design from the habitation module aft, and then it's just sort of being stuck, and just not being able to sort of move that any further, and kind of going, well, what is it that I'm missing here? I mean, and thinking now, maybe I need to design the walkways, the corridors first, and then sort of build the hull around those, with the idea that I want the thing to have sort of a nice looking blending, sort of from the cross section at the aft end of the habitation module to the neck, housing the nose gear and the nose gear float, and then further aft, where I have the two canoes stationed, and realizing that I want a ramp there to deliver those canoes to the water, and then sort of like uh, how I'm gonna bring the main wings up over the floats for the main landing gear in their stowed position, and then back down. How I'm gonna put the flaps in there, the ailerons. What I'm gonna do for these access tunnels to bolt and unbolt the floats, and then sort of realizing, like, wow, it's a really big risk to take a step in any direction at this point, in that I risk losing the overall look and feel of the thing as it stands now, by making any further designs. So I sort of have the constraint that I want the profile to remain, similar, if not exactly the same. And then sort of realizing that, where I had the nose landing gear, sort of gave the thing the look of having a chest, um, and that the nose and the windshield and the crest gave it the look from profile view of having a beak and eyes and a crest, a forehead, and a head, a back of the head, and then the neck, and then a chest, and the main landing gear being the feet, the wings being the wings, I guess, sort of gives it look and feel of some kind of crane, like a heron, or not so much a crow or an eagle or a hawk or a falcon, but more of a swan or a crane or a heron, and saying, "Wow, that is very cool," but the risk involved in doing anything else, it's just like, well, I may get to a point where I'm just like, I've just done 8 more hours of work and I want to start over again, or, oh, I took this too far, and how, it's just like, you know, I envision difficulty and frustration, and it's like, I don't want to do anything more. I just want to have maybe 50% more or 70% more conceptualized in my head, to the point where it's like, okay, I can just start building on the computer file what I have in my head, and I don't have to worry that I'm gonna mess something up. But then that's really hard, is to have something that detailed, something that requires that level of detail in the design in your head, to go at it with less of a risk factor on the computer file. So it's like, well, at some point it is advantageous to have actual Lego pieces and to sort of design in real 3D space. But then it's like, yeah, because there's a lot of the starting and stopping. There's a lot of oh, well, I'll go this way, and it's like, no, here I can do this better, or here I can do that differently. But that was with the damselfly that I did that, and what I came out with was a ship that's not even 20% as realistic as this new design. So I don't know what to do with it, but I think my next step is sorry, the dog's growling at me. My next step is do the vertical stabilizer, because I have that and where I can see how I want it when I look at the picture of the ship on the computer screen. I can go, okay, I want the vertical stabilizer to look, to start here and end here, and to be like about a curve like this, and then I can sort of see how for the front, the leading edge, and then I can sort of see how I want the trailing edge, and then of course I want a rudder on there too. So I don't know how that's gonna work. Um, but I think it's not gonna be so much of like 3 days in a row of 8 hour, 12-hour days. 36 hours of just pure design flow. It's gonna be more like, yeah, taking a look for 5 minutes, and that's what I did today. I looked at it for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and then I said, oh, okay, I can see how I'm gonna put in the tail, the vertical stabilizer. So and then after that, I don't know. I'm gonna have to try different things in the neck area, I guess, or just maybe at some point. It's a hard area to look at because it's like it's got to be beautiful in three different dimensions. I mean, it's gotta converge and diverge, and there's like three different levels. There's a top level, mid level, and the sort of bottom. And I don't really want to do anything in the bottom, but I might end up doing that. So I don't know. It's sort of like I'm stuck at this point, but not really. But it's like as far as saying anything more about it, um, I'm excited that I may be able to get it to work if like I said before, if I can get the movable wings and the clamshell ideas and the ramps and the flaps and the elevators and the main gear doors, then that'll be great. And great, I like great. Great is good. Great is wonderful. So and then there's always I may do a rendering of the full assembly and look at it in POV. And LD view helps too, although it's kind of buggy. LD view is kind of buggy, so it crashes a lot. But that's even almost better than POV because it takes less time to look at the thing from every angle. So all in all, it's a great project. It being Sunday, April 12th, 2015, and I'm excited to move. I'm motivated to move, but just not at the same sort of vibration as sort of my past actions and movements have been facilitated by, or sort of directed by. So then at some point, if I want the design to maintain the same vibration, I'm gonna have to obey that sort of vibrational level of action potential. If I just sort of went on with it at a different vibration, then I'm afraid, the first 30% of the design would be at a different vibrational level than the rest of it. So it's tough, but I'm excited.